Hey folks, this is Abel James, and thanks so much for joining us on Fat Burning Man, where we talk about real food and real results. We're here today with Chris Wark, the inspiration behind the popular website Chris Beat Cancer. I'm sure you can think of someone yourself who has struggled with cancer, but what can you do to survive it? Today we're going to explore the relationship between diet and cancer, specifically how a poor diet can lead to cancer and speed its growth, while a clean, nutrient-dense diet may help actually reverse it. Chris's story is powerful, so don't miss this episode. Before we get there though, here's a quick update. It was a huge weekend for our community. We just had a massive first ever Fat Burning Tribe party in person. I'll talk about that in a second. We also just wrapped up Ip6, which is basically the South by Southwest of health conferences here in Austin, Texas. I sampled raw camel milk, which is actually quite good, the milk of camels as it turns out, wrapped just about everything in bacon, and even got an awesome bacon necklace from Belinda's daughter. Thank you so much, Belinda. You have the best family ever. And we definitely drank far too much wine. We'll talk about that too. Now, I've been speaking at Ip6 for 5 years now, which I can't believe, but here's one thing that I noticed. Number one, we're definitely getting bigger. The real food movement is starting to change industry, which is totally nuts to see. So this weekend, quite a few of you came out to me and asked me this question: how is the wild diet different from the paleo diet? And it's a very good question, and I'm a huge fan of ancestral health and have been for a long time, but here's my quick answer. For the most part, eating wild means lower protein, lower sugar, and more vegetables in practice. We incorporate high fat and fermented dairy into some of our recipes. I'm a huge fan, while Allison, my wife, tends to go limited dairy or no dairy at all. We focus on eating some slow-burning starches, even if they do come from gluten-free grains or legumes in some cases as well. And there are plenty of little differences and rabbit holes that we can go down. But the most important thing is to focus on what we all have in common, which is the idea that you can heal yourself with real food. So speaking of that, I have to say, meeting Wes, Ambriel, Paul, and all the other members of the tribe was the highlight of the weekend for myself and for Allison as well. So some of you came all the way from Finland, Germany, Australia, and Mexico to come to our Fat Burning Tribe party. The first one we ever did in person, so we didn't know what we were doing, but it came out so well. And it was totally humbling to meet you in Texas, of all places. So thanks to all of you who made the trip. So cool to meet you. Now, if you weren't able to make the trip and you want to see the ridiculous spread of all of our feasts and the 25 natural wines that we tasted from all over the world, grab your phone right now. We documented an evening of glorious exceptions at our tribe party with my friend and wine guy Todd from Dry Farm Wines. He was on the show a few episodes back. If you do like to partake in wine or booze of any kind, it's worth listening to. So go take a listen to that if you haven't already. And for the pictures of the feasts, the wines, and the treats, including grass-fed lamb legs, curated cheeses, and chocolate brownie bites. A new recipe. Follow Abel James or Fat Burning Man on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and all that jazz. We're posting plenty of pictures from the experience. And I just want to say thank you so much once again to everyone who helped make that possible, specifically Allison, Melinda, and Todd. You guys are awesome. And thanks to all of you who came. We plan on doing plenty more of those coming up, maybe in Texas, maybe in some other parts of the country, maybe even around the world. So stay tuned, plenty of fun to come. If you want to meet us in person and find out about our next tribe party and get our new daily meal plans this month, visit fatburningtribe.com. Now on to the show with Chris Wark. You're about to learn what Chris ate before he was diagnosed with cancer, how to navigate the profit-driven world of cancer treatment in Western medicine, the truth about what effective means in the cancer industry, why some doctors say nutrition doesn't matter, what to eat if you want to live forever, and much more. Now, here's a quick note before we get to the interview. This isn't just about this show or this episode, by the way. It's about basically every interview that I ever do. I decided when I started Fat Burning Man and this podcast that I would be basically on my best behavior. We're trying to make it family friendly. And even if I do disagree with someone, I'm not going to pull the shock jock thing and be all confrontational. Trust me, I was on reality TV. There's enough of that in the world. What I like to do is bring everyone together. So I will always treat my guests on this show with respect, even when we disagree. And you probably realize by now that I'm not a huge fan of low-fat, calorie-restricted processed food diets. I'm also not a huge fan of juicing fruits and a few other things that you might hear about today and in other episodes of this show. Personally, I eat most of my calories from fat instead of carbs. Do some people do better with more carbs than fat? Definitely. Can a low-fat diet be a healthy one when it's made of clean, whole foods? Absolutely. For instance, on this episode, you'll see that Chris has the goal of reducing his risk of developing cancer, and he's getting great results by eating whole food carbs, fruits, and limiting animal protein. There are different scientific reasons for that, by the way, too. So I might not eat exactly the same way as Chris and other guests on this show, but there's a great deal that we can all learn from each other. Chris is a true inspiration, and it's an honor to have him on Fat Burning Man. And remember, you can visit fatburningman.com and get all of the transcripts, video, and special bonuses for every single show. All right, this is a great show. Hope you like it. Let's go hang out with Chris. Hi folks, today I'm thrilled to be here with Chris Wark, the man behind Chris Beat Cancer. In 2003, at 26 years old, real estate investor and musician, Chris Wark was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer. After surgery, he refused chemotherapy and chose nutrition and natural therapies to heal his body. In 2010, he went public with his story and mission to inspire people to take control of their health and reverse disease with a radical transformation of diet and lifestyle. His popular blog, Chris Beat Cancer, was born. Chris, I love your blog. It's blunt in the best way possible, honest, totally inspiring. Thank you so much for being here.
Man, thanks for having me. I love to share my story, and so here I am.
Right on. Yeah. Well, thank you for that. So, for the people listening who might not be familiar with your story, although a lot of people actually wrote in to have you specifically on the show. So I'm
Are you
stoked.
serious?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm stoked you're here. But for the people who aren't familiar with your story, can you please just tell us what it was like to be diagnosed?
Yeah. So I was 26, and I was having stomach pain, abdominal pain, for most of the year. And I thought it was an ulcer, and I ignored it, hoping it would get better. And it didn't get better, it got worse. And so in the fall of 2003, I went to the doctor, finally. Typical male, I just procrastinated for months.
It's nothing.
And
right.
yeah, it'll be fine. So, and I'd never had any health problems before. I mean, I'd never even really been in a hospital before. I'd never needed to. And so, they misdiagnosed it as an ulcer and gave me some medication that didn't work. Eventually ended up at a gastroenterologist, and he said, look, we can do a colonoscopy and go in there and where the sun don't shine, have a look around and see what we see. So I was like, okay. So they do the colonoscopy, and they found a golf ball sized tumor in my large intestine on the right side, which is the ascending colon right by my appendix. And at that point, they took a biopsy and said, look, we're going to test it and make sure it's not cancer. The next day he called and said, nope, you have colon cancer. We got to get you in surgery right away. We got to get this thing out of your body before it spreads and kills you.
Yeah.
And, like any cancer patient, I was totally shocked. Like, wait a minute,
Sure.
This is not in the life plan. And I don't have time for cancer. Like I'm in the middle of doing stuff. Right. So, and I was completely clueless about cancer. And this is really important because I had never had any family members diagnosed, no friends. Like I didn't know anybody that had been through cancer. And so I was a typical clueless cancer patient. I mean, as clueless as you could be about the disease, about treatment, about everything. So when they said, we got to rush you right into surgery immediately, I was like, okay. Now this was December 22nd.
Oof.
2003. So we're coming up on 12 years now, which is pretty great. But, it was 3 days before Christmas, man. I'm like, what in the world is happening?
Yeah.
So they wanted to get me in surgery like the next day. And I basically was like, look, can we at least do it after Christmas? So they're like, yeah, that's no problem. So they scheduled it for December 30th. So I went in, they took out a third of my large intestine, and, they took out the tumor. They found out it had spread to some lymph nodes. They took out a bunch of lymph nodes. They once I came out of surgery, they told me, look, you're stage 3C. It was basically making its way to your liver, and you're going to need 9 to 12 months of chemotherapy. And so I'm like, oh man, like this is just from bad to worse here.
Yeah.
Like before surgery, it was like, look, you just had the surgery, we'll take it out and you'll be fine. You can go back to your normal life. And now it was, no, you need chemotherapy. Like you're going to be a full-blown cancer patient. And when they told me that, initially I accepted that was like, okay, I guess this is my life now. And but there were a few things that happened in the hospital that were I consider to be serendipitous because they were just so weird that it got me thinking. It got the wheels turning. And the first thing that happened was the first meal they served me. Now, I don't know how familiar you are with my story. Do you know what the first meal was?
Sloppy Joes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So the first meal was a sloppy Joe, man. I mean, this is the worst cafeteria food you can conceive of, right?
Yeah.
This is like high school cafeteria, just mystery meat slop.
Yeah.
On a burger bun.
Yeah.
And they had just cut me. I mean, they'd split my guts open, right?
Mm-hmm.
Removed a third of my large intestine, my colon, sewed me back up, and they're like, "Here, eat this sloppy Joe now."
Right. God,
so
that makes me
to me
nauseous.
was very. What's that?
That makes me nauseous right now. I can't imagine what that was like.
Yeah, yeah. And I was not a healthy eater at all. Like
Yeah.
I was typical fast food, junk food, like, standard American diet eating guy.
Yeah. Even though you weren't fat, right? Like you were still kind of like ectomorph.
Total ectomorph. Yeah, I'm 6'2", probably 150 something pounds.
Yeah.
Always been thin. Never had a weight problem. Super high metabolism. So, and because of that, I always thought I could eat whatever I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I did eat some of the sloppy Joe. Let me just be honest here, okay? Because I hadn't eaten in like 3 days.
Sure.
But it just got me thinking, like, why are they serving this terrible, like, cafeteria, just terrible cafeteria food in the hospital to sick people?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. So a couple days later, it was the last day in the hospital. I was there for 4 days, 5 days, 4 nights, 4 days, 5 nights, whatever. And the surgeon came in to check on me before I was going to be sent home. And I asked him, I said, look, is there any food I need to avoid? Because, dude, I didn't know anything about anything. So I was afraid. I didn't want to go home and like eat some hot sauce and melt the stitches or something.
Right.
That's how clueless I was. So, or eat a Dorito and, I don't know. So he was like, nah, just don't lift anything heavier than a beer.
Yeah.
That was it. That was his dietary advice for me. Mm-hmm. So that was like red flag.
Beer's
number 2.
Okay, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of
it
was a joke, right? He was making a joke like, don't do any heavy lifting.
Sure.
Right? But the implication was pretty clear. It doesn't matter what you eat.
Yeah.
Right? Your diet doesn't matter.
Right.
And the craziest thing about that is that there's so much evidence that colon cancer, well, many cancers, most common cancers in the U.S. are Western cancers.
Yeah.
They're very common in Western nations, industrialized nations, and they're very rare in third world countries.
Right.
So my cancer specifically is a Western disease. Colon cancer is a Western disease. Mm-hmm. And the surgeon should have known that. Like he should have known that. He should have told me that. He should have known that the colon cancer rate in sub-Saharan Africa, Uganda, is 50 times lower than it is in the United States.
Right.
Like there's a reason for that.
And when you look back at history too, this is unprecedented, right?
Of course. Yeah. The levels of cancer. I'm glad you brought that up because there are people, sort of like cancer industry types that love to use this, they love people like us. I'm not putting words in your mouth, but people like me say cancer is a man-made disease.
Yeah.
Right? You've heard that expression. It's a man-made disease.
Sure.
And when people say it's a man-made disease, what they're talking about is it's exploded as a result of our choices and our diet and lifestyle and the Industrial Revolution. But cancer industry types like to try to discredit that by saying, well, no, we have a mummy that had cancer. See, cancer's always been around. Yeah, cancer's always been around. But the rates of cancer are unprecedented. Yeah. They are unprecedented. The diagnosis rate right now is the highest it's ever been in human history. Mm-hmm. So, and it all goes back to the Industrial Revolution. That's really when cancer rates started to skyrocket. When, men and women started working in factories, when we started eating processed food, when we started factory farming, when we started smoking tobacco. So, all of those, there's direct correlation with all of those habits and lifestyles and work habits and lifestyle habits and just the skyrocketing rates of cancer in the 20th century, especially.
Yeah.
So the cancer death rate actually tripled between 1900 and 1950, tripled. And that was largely from cigarette smoking. That was one of the major contributors.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, my surgeon doesn't care. I go home. I'm recovering from surgery. I wanted to get off the pain meds. I had this really strong, sort of internal resistance to being on pain medication. And I wanted to get off it as soon as possible. And what's amazing is I found out later that morphine and all opioid-based pain medication causes cancer to spread. It causes metastasis, which is insane. And no one knows this.
Right.
And I'll send you I'll share some links with you. You can put in your show notes.
Yeah, please do.
But yeah, I had this, my instincts were telling me get off this pain medication, So I got off it pretty quickly. And, one of the first things my wife and I did, we're Christians, we're believers. So, we prayed, and I was like, God, if there's another way besides chemotherapy, just show me. Yeah. Because I was as I sobered up, right, I was getting off the pain medication. I was really thinking about my life and my future.
Sure.
Man, I was just thinking, I don't want to be poisoned. I don't want to be sick. That doesn't make sense. The idea of poisoning my way back to health doesn't make sense. But I don't know what else to do. And I feel like there's something I could do. I feel like I need to change my life or something. There has to be a cause. Something had to have caused this. And maybe I had something to do with it.
Yeah.
But that's about all I just had these sort of this nebulous, mental state, trying to piece together why I was sick and what I could do about it.
Yeah.
So my wife and I prayed, man, and 2 days later I got a book that was sent to me from a man in Alaska who knew my dad. And this is a man I've never met, but he was a business acquaintance of my dad's. He heard that I was diagnosed with colon cancer, and he was, made a pretty bold move and sent me a book that was a very controversial book.
Sure.
Most people wouldn't send their business client's kid a book about healing cancer with nutrition.
Right.
But that's what he did.
A bold move.
Yeah. And that book's called God's Way to Ultimate Health. So I pray, I'm like, God, show me the way. And I get this book called God's Way.
Right.
So
funny how that works.
Yeah. So I start reading it, and man, I just knew immediately it was an answer to prayer. Because the guy that wrote it had colon cancer. Wow. And he didn't do surgery or chemo, and he healed it with a radical diet and lifestyle change. And to me, I was I could not believe that this story existed, right? And that I was had this book, and that it just came to me. So what he did was he converted to a raw diet. It was a raw food diet. So it was tons of fruits and vegetables, tons of juicing, especially carrot juice, and very little cooked food. I think, initially he was 100% raw, and then ended up becoming maybe about 85% raw. Okay. And so I was like, I'm doing this. This is it. I asked for an answer. I got something. I'm going to run with it. Yeah. So I called my wife, and I'm like, I got this book, and it's about the raw diet, and this guy healed his colon cancer. And she was like, okay, but you're still doing chemo. And I'm like, no, I'm not doing chemo. I finally understood, I need nutrition. I don't need chemo. Yeah. And so then I start getting phone calls from family members, it's we heard you're not doing chemo, and, are you thinking about it? And you really have to do chemo. You have to do what the doctor says. Don't you think if there was something that worked better than chemo, they would know about it and they would be using it? And at that time, I'm like, I don't know the answers to these questions. Sure. Yeah. I'm like, all I know is I prayed and I got this answer, and this is what I want to do. Yeah. And so that created a lot of confusion and conflict and stress and anxiety for me, because, I had this sort of clear answer, and everyone around me was telling me it was wrong. Yeah. Everybody was saying, don't do that, except my mom. My mom has been a health nut forever. She was the mom that was driving across town to some little hole in the wall health food store to buy wheat germ and like,
Yeah.
just
Sounds like my mom. That's awesome.
yeah, like little stuff. Now it's common, right? Now it's like most moms today are more hardcore than my mom was.
Yeah.
But anyway, she's always had like, little health food items and taking supplements and stuff, and had Prevention magazine, stacks of Prevention magazine on the toilet. So anyway, my mom was pretty in tune with this stuff, and she totally supported me. And as it turned out, she had amassed a pretty significant library of books on healing with nutrition over the years. So she had stored up all these books on alternative therapies and nutrition and all this kind of stuff. And just had stacks of these books in our house, and I didn't even realize it.
Yeah.
Like I never paid attention to it. And so, she had books like by Paul Bragg. She had like every Paul Bragg book.
That guy's
she
awesome.
had, You know who Paul
awesome.
Bragg is? Yeah. Dr. Schultz, Hulda Clark, The Cure for All Cancers. I mean, she's had all this stuff. So, I really went nuts and started reading and researching and learning as much as I could, as fast as I could.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, I had this family pressure to go see the oncologist. So I agreed to, in order to appease my wife and mostly her family, who loved me and wanted me to live. Let me just make that clear. In order to appease them, I was like, okay, all right, I'll go see the oncologist. I'll go hear what he has to say. So we go to the cancer clinic, man. The parking lot is packed. The waiting room's packed. I walk in, we check in, I sit down, I look around at all these people in the waiting room. And, it's kind of like your first day at school, right? You're kind of first day at a new school, you're walking in, you're kind of sizing everybody up, right? You're kind of seeing where you fit in. And I'm scanning the room, I'm looking around, and everyone there was 50, 60, 70, 80 years old. Like I'm 26.
Yeah.
Everyone in there was twice my age. Some people were 3 times my age. There were no 20 or 30-year-olds in there. And, I was just like, God, I don't belong here. Like, what am I even doing here? The television's on, and it's one of the morning shows, and out comes Jack LaLanne. Like, yeah, the guy was like on the Today Show or one of those shows. I don't even know which one it was. I still can't find the clip. But he comes out, and he starts going off about nutrition and, this is why we're sick, because we're eating all this man-made processed junk food and too much meat and dairy, and you need to go back to juicing and eating fruits and vegetables. And he's just going on. He's just like an old guy. I mean, at that point, I think he was probably like 85 years old, right? Yeah. And super fit, just going on, just ranting on the television. And I'm just like glued to it.
Yeah.
And it was like the tractor beam, right? I just couldn't believe it was happening. I was like watching this in the cancer clinic at this moment. It was like destiny. So I turned to my wife and I was like, "Can you believe this is like on right now?" And she was like, "Oh, that's pretty weird."
Yeah.
So we eventually go back to see. Oh, and the thing he said that just like really jumped out. He said, "If man made it, don't eat it." So we go back and talk to the oncologist, and man, the guy just gives me the standard pitch, and for anybody that doesn't understand how the cancer industry works, I mean, look, these are doctors, they're busy people, they're seeing, dozens of patients every day.
Yeah.
So this guy doesn't know me from Adam. He's in his office, he's flipping through a file. Okay, who's this guy? He's okay, Chris Wark, he's a colon cancer. Okay, all right, comes in to see me. Okay, you've got stage 3 colon cancer. You've got a 60% chance of living 5 years. We recommend you do 5-FU plus leucovorin chemotherapy, blah, blah, blah. Just the standard pitch. Yeah. And I asked him a couple questions that really changed the entire tone of the conversation. I didn't realize it would. But I said, I'm on the raw food diet. Can I keep doing that with chemo? And he said, no, that'll fight the chemo. You can't do that. What does that mean?
Yeah,
right?
Right.
And then I said, well, are there any other alternative therapies available? And he said, no, there are none. If you don't do chemotherapy, you're insane.
Yeah.
And that was like, man, I was like the scariest moment of my life right there. And the cancer industry, unfortunately, many, many doctors, I don't want to lump them all together, but I've talked to hundreds of cancer patients, and it almost always goes like this. They use fear to manipulate you and to intimidate you into saying yes to therapy.
Yeah.
They want you to say yes right away. And most people don't know that 60% of the income that a private practice oncologist makes comes from the markup on chemotherapy drugs. So the cancer industry is the only segment of the medical industry where the doctors actually make a profit off the drugs they prescribe.
Mm-hmm.
Most people don't know this,
Mm-hmm.
but they buy chemotherapy drugs directly from the manufacturer at a wholesale price. And then they mark them up to their quote unquote retail price.
Yeah.
And they sell them to you or bill your insurance company.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, that accounts for about 60% of their income. I mean, it's a huge chunk, right?
Yeah.
So there's a big conflict of interest there. I didn't know any of this at the time.
Sure.
We walked out of his office. You know, I walked into the clinic confident in what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I walked out of his office terrified.
Yeah.
And I walked to the desk and made an appointment to get a port put in to start chemotherapy in about 4 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
That's how afraid I was.
Yeah.
We walked out into the parking lot and we sat in my wife's car and we held hands and we just cried and we prayed. And it was one of the lowest points of my life, you know, just that whole season. But that day especially was very difficult because fear had just completely consumed me. Like I had lost faith in what I was doing and I was really shaken up.
Right.
So, but fortunately I had 4 weeks before I had to get that port put in. Because I was still still basically recovering from surgery. Mm-hmm. So I had a lot of time to think and pray and soul search and read and research. And in that time, man, I went back home and kept juicing and eating raw food. And like, I just kept at it. Mm-hmm. And by the time that appointment rolled around, I was like, no way, I'm not going.
Yeah.
And I just didn't go, it was a no-show.
Wow.
Then they send me a certified letter. We're concerned about your health. Please, call us immediately. Mm-hmm. Right, leaving messages on the answering machine. We actually had, this was back when people had answering machines, right. 2004.
Yeah.
So they eventually left me alone. Mm-hmm. And in that time, I also found a nutritionist who was very naturopathic, integrative nutritionist. Yep. And he connected me with an old oncologist that had come back out of retirement and was very, very much open to what you call alternative therapies, but like IV vitamin C mm-hmm. and anything that was nutritional or non-toxic that might support the immune system. Yeah. And he understood the immune system was key to my recovery. I mean, he just knew it. Sure. And this is Dr. Roy Page. He's deceased now, but he was in his 70s at the time. And the guy had been a surgical oncologist his whole life. I mean, he just knew it didn't work. Yeah. He just knew. I mean, he just seen it his whole life. Like the treatments don't work. Yeah. By work, work's a funny word in the cancer industry. So cancer industry lingo is very, very interesting. Mm-hmm. It's very deceptive. Yeah. So when I say this treatment doesn't work, I mean, this treatment doesn't cure cancer. Like it doesn't cure you. It doesn't restore your health. But when an oncologist says this treatment does work, he means it shrinks tumors. Mm-hmm. Okay. You can shrink a tumor and that means the treatment worked. Yeah. But you're not cured. And as soon as that round of chemotherapy is over, the cancer starts growing again, usually much faster because today, in fact, this morning, I read a new article, research that just came out of Russia, where they found out that 23% of breast cancer patients who had neoadjuvant chemo, which is chemo before they had a lump removed, 23% of them, it made their cancer aggressive and the cancer mutated. They call it cancer tumor evolution. And what that means is the tumor cells mutated and became resistant to chemotherapy. Yeah. That's 23% of them. So that's a fourth of women who had chemo, just that like 2 to 4 rounds of chemo before surgery to shrink it a little bit was enough to cause significant cancer cell mutation and make it chemo resistant. Crazy. Yeah, it's crazy. And it gets much worse the more you're treated. But anyway, so I can rabbit trail like to distant galaxies. So I'm going to try to keep it focused.
I read on your blog, it's like 4 to 6%, right? Is what chemo could do in your case, what you were told, right?
Yeah. So the effectiveness of chemo I was saying about the way that the industry defines the word work or the word effective. So when they say this is a very effective treatment, the doctor means we know that this will shrink a tumor to some percentage over some period of time, right? But patients don't know that. They hear the word effective and they think it means cure. They hear this treatment works very well and they think, oh, that means it's curing everybody. And it's not. So it depends on your type of cancer. So just to be completely, fair, the cancers that the cancers that the cancer industry has had the best success with in terms of actually curing some people are blood-based cancers, also known as non-epithelial cancers. So leukemia, childhood leukemia especially, and Hodgkin's disease, which is an adult lymphoma, typically in adults, and non-Hodgkin's in some cases as well, and testicular cancer. So those 4 cancers, they've really made big strides in the longer survival rate and cure rates. So if you lump those 4 together, the average survival is about 90% of people live 10 years. That's just pretty good. Okay. But if we're talking about epithelial cancers, which are solid tumor cancers, breast, colon, lung, liver, pancreas, brain, ovarian, cervical, prostate, although prostate cancers, most of them are very slow growing. So they're not really a big risk for most people. But most men with prostate cancer die of something else. But anyway, we're talking about all these solid tumor cancers. The cure rate is abysmal. I mean, in 60 years, the death rate of all cancers, and this is taking the good ones, right? The ones that they've made the big progress on, and lumping them all together, in 60 years since chemo was introduced, the death rate has only come down about 5%.
Jeez.
It's ridiculous, man. 5%. And that means for some cancers, the death rate hasn't changed at all. In 60 years, right? And for, like I said, you can count them on one hand, cancers that they've made improvements on. But those are the ones they parade as if they're making huge progress, right? Give your money for cancer research because look at this wonderful progress we've made with 4 cancers. But don't look at the 100 other cancers. So colon cancer for me, right? I had about the doctor told me I had a 60% chance of living 5 years. Flat out lied to me. Which is just not true for stage 3C colon cancer in a young adult. It was more like 28%.
Wow.
And the 10-year survival is somewhere around 16 to 18%. And this is with standard therapy. So this is including chemotherapy. So the odds were stacked against me in a number of ways. And yet here I am. And so I don't consider myself lucky. The reason I'm still here is because I made some very specific, deliberate choices. I mean, I radically changed my entire life. I took full responsibility for my health and my situation. And it's sad because, in the cancer industry, doctors and a lot of patients sort of propagate this idea that it's not your fault, right? It's not your fault. Don't blame yourself. You're just unlucky. It was genetic. There's nothing you did to cause this, and therefore there's nothing you can do to help yourself. So let us just do our thing, and you just go home and just make sure you get enough calories. So yes, pizza is fine, and Wendy's Frosties are okay, ice cream. Just make sure you get enough calories during treatment. This is what they tell cancer patients. And and the cancer treatment clinics are full of donuts and candy and whatever else they want to feed them. And they want to eat. So
worse than hospitals.
Worse than hospitals. And again, they're telling people that there's nothing you've done contributed to this, which should be criminal because we have so much epidemiological research. Scientists and researchers and doctors from around the world for the last, almost century have been publishing papers on disease rates, on cancer, on diet and lifestyle. And we have this ridiculous amount of data showing that, look at, like I said earlier, sub-Saharan Africa, the colon cancer rate's 50 times lower. But it's not just Africa. I mean, Mexico, the Mexican cancer rate, the death rate's half of the US.
Wow.
Yeah, their cancer rates are half in Mexico. And there are dozens and dozens of countries with cancer rates that are a third, a fifth lower, depending on the type of cancer, 10 to 15 to 20 times to even 50 times lower.
Yeah.
And the amazing thing is, the farther down the rabbit hole I've gone with all of this research, the cool thing is that it all sort of, it's come full circle, because all of the healthy populations around the world have a few things in common. One, they're not eating a Western diet.
Yeah.
So they're not eating processed food, man-made food, and junk food. Two, they're eating very little animal products, very little meat and dairy. So in the poorest parts of the world, you don't have access to steaks. You don't have access to, chicken, fish, pork. It's a very special occasion that you feast on something like that. And these people are subsisting on very simple, humble food from the earth. So if we're in rural Africa or China or India or Southeast Asia or South America, they're eating mostly starches. They're eating rice and beans and corn, and they're eating potatoes. And this is what they're surviving on, right? They're eating plantains, they're eating fruit. And none of them are vegan, but they are subsisting on plants. And the amazing thing is that when you look at the research of countries as they become industrialized, like China's this wonderful recent example, and so is Japan, is as income grows and wealth grows and industrialization grows in a nation, in a country, then with industrialization comes wealth. And the first thing that people start spending money on is meat. Yeah. That's the first thing.
But usually
the more money they have, the more meat they eat.
Right? It's like the richer you are, the worse the meat gets.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we're eating like kings. And really the healthiest diet is to eat like a pauper, right? To eat like a poor person, not to eat like a king. And in America, we feast every meal. Every meal is a feast. It's tons of meat, dairy, sugar, oils, salt. It's just like, it's got to just be like a taste sensation.
Right.
Right. I was laughing this morning because I usually most mornings I eat a giant bowl of oatmeal, and it's got flax and hemp seed, and put berries in there, and molasses and lots of stuff. And I was eating it, and I was thinking, this is so bland. And I was like, I bet if I served this to 10 people, they would not like it. Yeah. They wouldn't eat it because it's not sweet enough. It's not whatever enough, Yeah. And I'm just like totally happy eating it. I'm like, I love this. Like, it's so bland, right? But it's just great. Like, I love it. And so, because I think you had this shift. I did. There's a shift that happens where you realize I don't eat for pleasure anymore. Like, I eat for a totally different reason. Right? I eat for survival. I eat for health. I eat for nutrition. Yeah. Like, I'm not just saying food I eat tastes terrible. Yes, I want it to taste good. Yeah. But I had that switch that flipped in my brain when I realized I needed to start eating ridiculous amounts of broccoli. Yeah. So
that is a big shift for a 26-year-old dude.
Yeah, right? Yeah. So, and I should talk about this too, because people are probably like, "What in the world did he eat?" So, this is what I ate in my first phase of my anti-cancer diet. Was I was drinking 64 ounces of carrot juice every day. So I was getting up first thing in the morning, running 5 pounds of carrots through the juicer, and drinking. That would make about 64 ounces, plus some celery and beets and ginger root, and would drink the carrot juice throughout the day. I did several multi-day juice fasts, like a 10-day juice fast in the beginning. And then I was doing 3 or 4 or 5 days at a time, like periodically. And then it usually was not having breakfast. I was just juicing through the morning. I might have a piece of fruit, like a green apple or a grapefruit. At that time I was eating really sort of low sugar fruits. And then, lunch and dinner, it was the same thing every single day. And it was what I call the giant cancer fighting salad.
Yeah.
And there's a post on chrisbeatcancer.com called the giant cancer fighting salad. You can see what all's in it. But basically, it was all the cruciferous and allium family vegetables. So it was broccoli, cauliflower, kale, and red cabbage. It was onions, and then mushrooms. I'd also have spinach in there. I'd have red, yellow, green peppers in there. And then I would top it with tons of garlic and cayenne pepper and oregano, and then a little olive oil and apple cider vinegar.
Sounds awesome.
Man, it's delicious.
Yeah,
it's delicious. Yeah, and it's a huge salad. And it took forever to eat it because it was so big. And I would eat that for lunch and dinner. And in the beginning, I was like, well, I need some raw food recipes because I went 100% raw. I need some raw food books and cookbooks. And I started going through these raw food cookbooks, man. It was way too much work.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, man, all this like dehydrating and food prep and all this stuff. Like, forget it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't have time for that. Like, and plus, if you look at a raw recipe, it might have 4 or 5 ingredients. My salad has like 20.
Right.
I'm like, well, I want to eat all of these 20 things like every single day. Like, I don't want to leave anything out. So the salad just became an easy, like sort of very simplistic, okay, this is everything I want to eat today in one bowl.
It's hilarious because like you wouldn't expect it, but in a way, salads are like the ultimate man food, right? Because you just throw a bunch of stuff in a bowl and eat it.
It's super fast.
Yeah.
It is definitely fast food. There's no doubt about it. You got some chopping, a little bit of chopping involved, and that's about it. Throw it in a bowl and eat it. So I did that for 90 days. And then at the end of 90 days, I was really thin because of the juice fasting and the surgery and being thin anyway. So I got down to about 130 pounds.
Wow.
I was
6'2". 6'2"?
Right.
Jeez.
6'2", 130 pounds. So I'm like total skeleton. And my nutritionist was like, I think we just need to add a little bit of cooked food into your diet. And a little animal protein. Now, at the time, I'd been 90 days raw and quote unquote on a vegan diet, but I did not ever become a vegan.
Sure.
If you understand the difference, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, man, I just want to live. So if you think I need it, like, okay. So we added cooked food back in. So at night, I'd start eating sweet potatoes, brown rice, quinoa, and cooked vegetables. And then he said, a couple times a week, why don't you try to have either a piece of wild-caught salmon or some lamb. Yeah. And so I was like, okay. So I incorporated that here and there, but didn't really ever, and that helped. Like just having a little bit more calories, because cooked food has about twice the calories of raw. So just those little bit more calories in cooked food helped me gain weight back. And it also made me realize, because when I was in the raw mentality, I was like, raw food only, and you can get really sucked in and it can kind of make you crazy. Yeah, of course. So I realized like maybe cooked food isn't, evil, like some raw foodists want you to believe. Yeah. But yeah, cooked vegetables are wonderful. And the healthiest people around the world eat tons of cooked vegetables. So yeah, I don't see any legitimate argument that one needs to be raw to have optimal health. Right. Or
but anyway, exclusively raw.
Right? Yeah, right. Yeah. Right. There's, if someone wants to be exclusively raw, then that's fine. But basically, it's an experimental diet. Yeah. Like, that's fine. You want to eat an experimental diet, go right ahead, like the ketogenic diet. Experimental diet. We all have freedom to eat and experiment and do whatever we want. But when you look at all the published research on the healthiest, longest living people around the world, to me, that's more interesting. Like, I'd rather imitate successful people, and so we know that they eat tons of plant food, very little animals, and of course stay away from all the processed man-made junk food. And the other two components that I really want to mention too is fresh air is fresh air, sunshine, and exercise.
Yes, thank you.
Which poor cultures get, right? And we don't. Like, generally speaking, we don't get enough fresh air, sunshine, and exercise because we're in our houses all day, or we're working in an office, or both, right? So we're in our house or in an office all day. We're not working out in a garden or growing our own food or raising livestock or, building things outside, right? And we're sedentary. What is it? 2/3 of us are overweight. 1/3 of us are obese. Obesity is the second leading cause of cancer. Yeah. Number one is cigarettes. Number two is obesity. People don't know this.
Right.
It's actually the second leading cause of cancer, because when you carry excess body fat, obviously this is the Fat Burning Man show, so it's pretty relevant to your audience here. But excess body fat causes a cascade of problems in the body.
Right.
One of them is hormonal. And hormones drive cancer growth. They fuel cancer growth. And one of the reasons that eating too much meat and dairy fuels cancer growth is because you're eating a lot of hormones. Dairy has 60 plus hormones in it. Any type of animal protein is going to raise IGF-1, which is insulin-like growth factor, which is cancer rocket fuel. So hormones are a problem for us, like not to mention xenoestrogens, right? So like BPA and man-made chemical hormone mimicking agents. So controlling the hormones in your body is so important. It's really critical to health. And obesity just wrecks that. Yeah. And so any way somebody can get the weight off, I'm fine with, like, just get it off. Like if you're overweight, if you need to just smoke some crystal meth for a couple of weeks, I'm kidding. But getting weight off is really, really important, even if it's a crash diet, just to, get it off. Then, the problem that most people have is they go back to their old habits, right? Right. And so crash diets typically don't work, but I'm all for someone getting the weight off if they can then adopt a super healthy lifestyle and maintain it.
Yeah. And it's not necessarily that difficult to do. It's just a matter of sticking to it, right? There are some fundamental things. And it takes a shift in the way that you think about things. To go back to one of your earlier points, we were in Indonesia asking and traveling the world, asking my wife and I why they thought Americans were fat. And there's one particular conversation that really resonated with me where this guy, living in Bali, he said, well, here's why I think Americans are fat. Because, generally speaking, we'll sit down with the whole family for a meal, and it will have a bit of rice, it will have veggies that we usually grew in the backyard, and then maybe a quarter of a chicken. And the whole family will split that. We'll just have a few bites. We'll be satisfied. In America, you get a whole bucket of chicken.
Yes, you do.
It's ridiculous. And I just thought, the difference between those two things is so enormous that, like, no wonder we're in such bad shape.
I know, man. It's just too much.
Yeah.
Like, it's overconsumption. It's too much. We eat, since 1900, in 1900, we were healthier. But our calorie consumption has jumped up from average 3,600 calories a day to 4,000.
Yeah.
Right. So, or is it 3,400 to 4,000? It's either 400 or 600.
Things, but it's too much now.
Yeah, it's either 400 or 600. I was looking at the USDA's data on this the other day, and so it's a little bit fresh, but a little bit convoluted in my brain. But the point is, we're just eating more food, and one of the biggest sources that we're eating more of, it's not carbs. We're eating more oils. We're eating more fats and oils than we were 100 years ago. That segment of the macronutrients with protein, fat, and carbs has grown the most. We're eating more oils. And, I think people just don't get it. I mean, a tablespoon of oil is 120 calories. Right. I mean, that's 1.5 bananas. It's crazy.
Yeah, and it adds up pretty quick, considering how many fried foods we're eating.
Yeah.
And how pretty much, even if you go out, you get a salad. This is one thing that, people a lot of times will assume that getting a salad is a healthy thing, but it's covered in mayonnaise, or it's covered in, GMO oils. It's covered in the worst stuff, such that, it has 4 times as many calories as a hamburger.
The oils are the hidden source of calories that people they're not talking about, and they don't think about. That's obviously liquid calories. I mean, sugary drinks, of course, are a source of calories, but I think most people sort of get that. Well, that's why there's so many Diet Coke drinkers in the world. Yeah. But the oils really, really get you. Something amazing to me is, Kerrygold grass-fed butter, right? You've seen it, I'm sure. Well, it's like this big for a block of it. And if that block of butter is, let me make sure I do the math right here. It's 1,600 calories. Okay, in that block of butter. So if you ate that block of butter, it'd be 1,600 calories. Well, you know what else is 1,600 calories? an entire loaf of Ezekiel bread.
That's crazy.
Yeah, they're both the exact same calorie count.
Yeah.
And so you just think about, what would you rather eat if you were starving? What would you rather have, right? An entire loaf of bread? You couldn't eat the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
No way. You could eat a stick of butter.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you could eat a whole stick of butter if you were hungry, and that was all there was to eat.
I've tried.
You couldn't eat the whole loaf of bread.
Yeah.
So anyway, I do like bread. I like grains. Like, you know, I'm a little bit controversial because there's so many people in the health world that are against grains and beans.
Sure.
And the healthiest populations around the world eat grains and beans. Now, of course, GMO grains are terrible, and crossbred, hybridized grains can be problematic.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to dismiss those things, but if we really just look at the healthiest cultures and what they eat grains. So grains are not the devil.
Mm-hmm. They're
They're not evil, and they're not the reason we're all sick and fat.
Yeah.
And beans, my biggest pet peeve is the idea, and the idea that keeps getting propagated by people that phytates are bad.
Mm-hmm.
Phytates are awesome.
There's a lot of that in the paleo community. And
I know,
a lot of people
man.
listening, they subscribe to the belief that no grains, no legumes, kind of ever, right, is the solution. But phytates, it's not that simple.
No, phytates are awesome. In fact, phytic acid, which is inositol hexaphosphate, which is also shortened as Ip6. Ip6 is phytic acid, and it is a very powerful anti-cancer nutrient.
Mm-hmm.
It inhibits the growth of almost every type of human cancer. And what's amazing is cancer tumors and cancer cells suck it up rapidly. Like, you can track cancer by the uptake of Ip6 in the body. They love it, and it destroys them. They uptake it, and then it causes cell death and problems in the tumor.
Yeah.
So Ip6 is awesome. Like, you want it in your body, and you get it from beans and grains. And so this big movement against beans and grains is craziness.
Yeah.
I mean, beans are so great for your colon health because of Ip6.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I wish
that's
that
my biggest pet peeve.
A lot of the problem with grains too is the same problem that people have with meats. Our quality of food that we have now is so low that, like, it almost doesn't matter if you're eating grains or if you're eating meat, or even if you're eating, GMO produce. A lot of the times, if you're in America, you need to watch out and go for the old school stuff that they are eating in the other half of the world, where they have some sort of intact traditions that tell them how to eat, that tell them what are the things that are actually healthy and how to prepare these foods, because it's old school stuff. It's before Jack LaLanne stuff, right? And it's so simple.
Yeah, I mean, the Chinese have been eating rice for thousands of years.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the reason that their rates of diabetes have spiked in the last couple decades. People are like, oh, it's all the white rice. They've been eating white rice for thousands of years.
Yeah.
Like, that hasn't changed. What's changed is their consumption of meat, dairy, and oils, which has skyrocketed since all of the industrialization and westernization. Mm-hmm. It's like rice. What a great grain. I love rice. I like teff. Teff is sort of my pet favorite grain.
Teff is pretty cool.
Teff, yeah, I love teff. Love injera, the Ethiopian bread made from teff. Mm-hmm. Oats every day. Quinoa sometimes. Although, quinoa, I love it for its nutritional value, but it's never tasted good to me.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know. You know what it tastes like.
You got to mash it up and turn it into pancakes or something.
Okay, that might work. I'll have to try that. But yeah, rice, oats, quinoa, teff, millet, and spelt. I mean, we buy Ezekiel bread, so I'll have that every once in a while.
Sure.
I'm a little bit sensitive to wheat, so I kind of avoid wheat just in general.
Yeah.
For some reason, Ezekiel bread doesn't bother me. I think maybe it's because it's sprouted. I don't know.
Could be.
But
well, it's a fundamentally different thing also than the super processed wheat bread that you find in the supermarket too.
Yeah. White, right. Well, it's actually flourless, right? So like white flour, bleached white flour, stripped of all the nutrition, and they add like 4 vitamins, minerals back to it, or 4 or 5. Not many, Yeah, there's nothing good for you in there.
Totally. Well, so we could rant all day, and I would love to, but we're almost out of time.
Let's rant all day.
Before we go, can you talk to folks just like obviously we're talking about radical lifestyle changes. This is
Yeah.
content packed. You've given so many nuggets of good stuff. But what is like one thing that you would say to people on the other end of this who maybe don't have cancer but are probably going to? What can they do right now to kind of nip that in the bud?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's a great question. So I'm going to try to answer it in the shortest way possible, which won't be very short. But I think it's important that you understand what's causing cancer. We just need to understand this. And there are basically three things that are causing cancer: our diet and lifestyle, environmental pollution, and stress. Okay, those are the three main umbrella causes of cancer. Now, some cancers are caused by like viruses and bacteria, but talking about the big causes, especially Western cancers. So you're living in America or the Western world, if you have the internet, right, then the number one cancer killer is lung disease, and then colon, and then breast cancer for women. So these are Western cancers. So diet and lifestyle is super important. The number one thing you can do is start eating like other cultures. Stop eating the American diet.
Yeah.
Stop eating fast food and junk food. I know it's easier said than done, but return to a diet that is a whole food, plant-based diet. You don't have to be a vegan, but when you look at the healthiest cultures around the world, they eat mostly plants and starchy vegetables that, potatoes, rice, and beans that, of course, some segments of the health community think are terrible, but I think are wonderful. There's a great book called The Blue Zones, which is all about the healthiest, longest living cultures in the world and the way they eat and live. And it's a great book. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, that's a cool one.
Yeah. And then the lifestyle habits that tie into it is you've got to move your body. You need to exercise. Like take the stairs instead of the elevator, work at a stand-up desk, like join a gym, walk, run, do karate, ride your bike, rock climb, like anything, like any movement is good. Right.
There's an awesome picture of you upside down. I think on one hand, right? Just getting your lymph flowing.
Yeah, man. A little one-handed handstand, right? So anything you can do. Like I was at, worked out at a CrossFit gym for a couple of years. Now I'm in an Iron Tribe gym, which is basically the same thing, very similar. And so I love to do that. But any movement is great. Like movement is life. So you eat a whole food plant-based diet with minimal meat and dairy and minimal or to no processed food. Moving your body is so critical. You need to move. And then even walking is wonderful. And then the avoidance of pollution, because there are some serious man-made toxic chemicals, 80,000 plus in our environment, that there's a synergistic toxicity that we don't even understand. There's no way to understand how all of these food additives and environmental pollutants and all this stuff interacts with each other in the body. And so taking steps to reduce your toxic exposure, I think, is very, very important. And, I think so many people in your audience have seen these things. I mean, if you're on Facebook, you're probably seeing these articles all the time. And but switching to non-toxic body care products is an easy one. Switching to non-toxic home cleaning products and laundry detergent and dish detergent and soaps. If you work in a paint factory, you're in a toxic work environment every day. You should probably try to get a new job. Like working in some kind of toxic, like chemical factory is a bad idea. Hairdressers have elevated cancer risk compared to other occupations because of all the dyes and bleaches and straighteners and, other salon chemicals. So your workplace is very important as well. So, you got the diet and lifestyle, you got environmental pollution, and then the third one would be reducing stress. And I think stress is the underlying cause of most diseases in the Western world because stress and anxiety suppress your immune system. And stress leads you to destructive behavior, right? Whether it's drinking or smoking or drug abuse or prescription drug use or, just promiscuous sex or, addictive behaviors of all types or overeating, obvious. So, really facing down your stresses in life and the people that you need to forgive those people, and the problems that you're avoiding or running away from or things you're ashamed of, like facing those things and owning them and forgiving yourself. Man, that is so key. I can tell you every cancer patient I've ever talked to, and this is hundreds and hundreds now, had major chronic stress in their life leading up to the diagnosis. So, and this kind of stuff is an abusive relationship, a divorce, the loss of a loved one, a really terrible, stressful work environment, like all of those things. Money problems is another one. But all of those like sort of long-term chronic stressful situations, like unresolved problems that persist, weaken you. They weaken your immune system. And that persistent anxiety and stress makes you very vulnerable. Yeah. And so dealing with stress is so key to not only healing cancer, but preventing it as well. So that's in a nutshell, that's what people need to do.
That's
those three things, like
stuff.
Healthy diet, exercise, and that, truth is simple. Like it is. Truth is simple. Diet and exercise matter. That's like, it's like the pillars of health are diet and exercise.
Right.
It's not,
Despite what your doctor tells you.
Yeah, it's not a superfood supplement, right? Yeah. It's just basic human need, that is not being fulfilled. It's just healthy diet, exercise, and being in a non-stressful or reducing stress as much as possible. And let me tag something onto that. Yeah. Man, our culture is so bombarded with stressful information. I mean, if you lived in rural Africa, you would not know all of these problems that are going on in the world. But because you live in the US, you're bombarded with, Black Lives Matter and transgender issues and, the refugees and are we about to go to war and ISIS every day and the election. I mean, like all of this stuff, right? And like, Paris bombings, like we're being bombarded with so much negativity and fear and stress that no person can handle it. Yeah. Like you cannot handle it. And it just weighs you down. Like the weight of the world, we're all like basically carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders. If you're constantly tuned into major media. Now, yes, I obviously know about those things, but like my knowledge of them is very little. Like I'll get the blurb and the headline, but I don't like zone into it every day, Fox News or whatever, and just like let it, pollute me with anxiety. Yeah.
News fasting. It's a thing. It works. News fasting is what we call
Media
it.
fasting, news fasting. Yeah, I mean, I don't watch the news. The only reason I know about any news at all is because I see things on Facebook, right? Sure. I see headlines that people share, and occasionally I'll click one to read it. But yeah, I mean, I really, really deliberately stay away from any negative media or news because, man, we've all got enough problems in our own personal lives, and that's enough. Like your own personal problems are enough.
That's tweet right there.
Yeah, that's enough. Like you don't need to be worrying about the problems around the world. Like we all kind of have to solve our own little problems, I love it. So anyway.
Well, Chris, this has been so awesome. Where can people find you? What are you working on next?
Yep. So chrisbeatcancer.com is where people find me. I have YouTube channel, Facebook page, Twitter, all that stuff, Instagram. But the real good stuff is on my website. That's where I've got 50 plus interviews with people who have healed cancer with nutrition. Cool. That's so important. I mean, that's most of what I do is I just love to find and interview people who've healed. Yeah. And I'm really just compiling a database just to share with the world, like, hey, if you want to try to heal with nutrition, if you want to incorporate nutrition, even if you're doing chemo, like here are some resources for you. They're free. So that I've got a 20 questions guide that's really, really great. It's called 20 Questions for Your Oncologist. And I'm sure you can link to it in the show notes, but this is a free guide that I put together that takes a patient through every single important question they need to ask their doctor, because most are clueless. I was, and I can tell you, man, their doctors are not telling patients what they need to know. They tell them very little. Like, here are the drugs you're going to take. You're going to get sick. Your hair is going to fall out. But we have some other drugs to help you not feel as bad. And that's basically all they know. Yeah. And so if you ask the right questions in the beginning, it can dramatically alter the course of your treatment. And you can make a really wise, informed decision if you have all the facts. Sure. And most cancer patients are making a fear-based decision, not a fact-based decision. So that guide is for them to help them like make a great decision in the front end before they end up calling me saying, I wish I hadn't said yes to chemo and radiation because I'm worse and I'm stage 4 and help.
Yeah.
You know? So that's my most recent kind of thing that I put out into the world that I'm really excited about. And then launching a coaching course in January and a book next year too. So fun stuff.
I love it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Chris, this has been so much fun. I'd love to have you back anytime. Thanks so much for coming on.
Anytime, Abel, man. You're great. Thanks so much for having me, man. This is really fun.
Thanks again for listening to Fat Burning Man. Don't forget, before you go, check out fatburningtribe.com. If you have a question for me that you want answered about how to improve your performance, what to eat for dinner, how to drop fat quickly, how to improve your overall health, or anything else, we answer all of your questions there. So quickly, you can get the first month for just $1 for a limited time. Check it out at fatburningtribe.com. All right, I'll see you there. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Fat Burning Man. If you liked it, don't forget to hit the subscribe button on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, the podcast app, or wherever else you might be listening to or watching this show. Got a second? Please leave me a quick review on iTunes. I always love hearing from you, and if you think someone else might like and benefit from this free show, please take a second to share it with a friend or with a family member. You can get in touch with me on Twitter at FatBurnMan and Facebook by typing in Abel James or Fat Burning Man. Drop me a line anytime. Did you know that I've recorded over 150 episodes of Fat Burning Man, winning 4 awards in independent media and hitting #1 in more than 8 countries? And here's some more good news. You can download and listen to every single episode for free. All you have to do is type in fatburningman.com. I'll give you a second to type it in, fatburningman.com. And you'll get all the show notes in video and audio versions for all the past episodes of Fat Burning Man. Better yet, enter your best email at fatburningman.com, sign up for my newsletter, and I'll even send you a quick start guide to start burning fat right now and a few of our ridiculously tasty recipes as a special thanks for signing up. Once again, just go to fatburningman.com right now, enter your best email to get your free fat burning download straight to your inbox, and make sure that you never miss a show again. This is Abel James signing off. Thanks so much for listening, and have a great week. Right.
So very low carbohydrate diets are not, they're not for everybody. And women especially tend to have these sort of counterproductive reactions. Like, it's great that you're losing weight, but it's at the expense of your immune system functioning, your sex hormones.